right, fam, here we go. I am Jerry A. Thompson. Welcome to this episode of the Pivot Play podcast, and we're going to jump right in. So, if you're here already, do us a favor and like and share. It's 100% free, as best I know. But that helps us in terms of the algorithms and such. But we really want to get this message out. I think this is going to be a phenomenal uh, time that we're going to have a great conversation. So we want to get everybody in this as much as possible. So like and share, please. And I do believe that as we go through this, we should be able to see your comments and reactions. I'm hoping that's the way that this works. So we'll get to that. Let's see here. A couple of housekeeping items. Well, you know what? Forget that. Let's just dive right in. So,
Are you sure?
we're,
I love a few housekeeping items. Those are great.
yeah. So this morning on this episode, I'm actually going to be interviewed on my own podcast um, by a friend of mine who, man, he can talk about how long we've known each other. I'm not even going to get deep into the intros. What I want to do now is bring him in so we can get this conversation going. So there you are. So before we start, because I'm gonna turn this over to you. I'm gonna stop being in charge.
You're
Um,
no longer the host.
I'm not. I am now the guest. You are the
Fantastic.
host, so you are in charge. So just have at it, man. Go for it.
It is super honoring to be like the Jay Leno of the Live Free podcast. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Maurice Baynard. In my day job, I'm vice president of community learning at the Academy of Natural Sciences of Drexel University in the great state of Pennsylvania, in the wonderful city of Philadelphia, which, even though Jerry Anthony Thompson will not claim it, is sort of like where he hails from. So Jerry, it's like a super honor. But I was thinking about this last night. We touched base a little bit, and I was thinking nothing could be more comfortable than to have a conversation about big ideas with you. We have been doing this for the vast majority of my life. And so I did some quick math, and it means that 38 years ago,
Jesus.
next month, we will have spent hours, maybe days, maybe weeks sitting in rooms and sort of unpacking both our understanding of what the world is about, where it's going, what our purpose is, and how best to maximize this short opportunity that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a quote that I can't get out of my mind, and I say it to as many people as humanly possible. And I want to start there. So my quote that I cannot sort of let go of is that the opportunity of a lifetime must be realized in the lifetime of that opportunity. That we don't have infinite opportunities in life. And unless you get brave and lean in and already prepared to take advantage of it, then those windows close.
Huh.
What quote, idea, or concept can you not let go of and you share it with everybody whenever you get a chance?
So that's situational for me now, but foundationally for me is one that I've used forever, which is the project on the table is your life. If you don't work on it, no one else will. That one goes deep with me before anything.
So I remember when I first heard that back in the 90s. And I feel like my understanding of what that means over time has changed as I've lived a little bit more and thought more about the project. In your mind, what is your understanding of what that means and how you apply it? How has it changed since you first started saying it, I don't know, in 92? And or first sort of it dawned on you, and the way in which you understand it today.
So I would have to say that that was a bit of an epiphany for me to understand that because I had spent the bulk of my life up to that point, from childhood into early adulthood, being tossed around by circumstance.
Yep.
Things that happened, I often tell the story that, to my recollection, like I've places where I've slept and called home for any period of time, I've moved 35 times before I was 35 years old. So extremely transient, certainly no stranger to lack, and that idea of not having enough. But
Mm.
but then again, that epiphany that helps you to understand. Oh, well, wait a minute. I do have some influence on what my life becomes and what direction I go in, how I contribute, how I show up.
Yep.
And so once it hit, and is from a principle standpoint, I think that all principles should be tested,
Yeah.
to see if they deliver on their promise or if they withstand the test of time. And I haven't found a reason that I would alter ever saying that statement at this point.
Do you think there's ever a time when not just to acknowledge the fact that you've got to take initiative, that it is right there at the center of your life to do the thing that you can do, and we'll talk more about the principles in Live Free Lifestyle that sort of get at that, but that there are so many of us think about the outside influences, the things that keep us from doing what we want, as you say, the histories we're born into. Moving 35 times before you're 35 is generally not an ideal situation. How do you think about the way in which the things we don't have control over sometimes constrain people and make them feel like they're powerless?
So I think the first is environment, right? The places where you are, the people that you're around, what's their line of thinking, what are their typical behaviors. So it's easy to have that sense that you're being put upon. But there's this concept, and I've not written about this yet, that I call the beacon of betterment,
Yeah.
where I believe that there's always sort of this energy, this force that's drawing us to better, or improvement for ourselves because it's for the betterment of all humanity. And I think if people can just have a moment to allow that to seep in, because like, so physics, right? A body in motion will stay in motion until it's acted upon by some external force. And if you
Right.
have a person who's been sort of raised in survival mode, whatever breaks them out, and is that one moment where their imagination allows them to see a different outcome or a different possibility. That is the beacon of betterment. And so if a person can just attach to that, even if in their imagination, that becomes the catalyst that allows other things from the inside out to allow a person to change their circumstance. But there has to be that one moment where you can see a different outcome or a different future.
I want to talk about this influence of who you're around. That really resonates with me, like what messages you're hearing despite your circumstances. And I want to frame it as the law of attraction, but not the famous one.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a law of personal attraction. So we famously went to the same college. I showed up, a year or two after you. It's a college campus. It's a university. You can end up in anybody's dorm room. You could end up friends with anyone. And chances are, I mean, just pure statistical numbers. You shouldn't have been my friend. We came from different parts of the world. We didn't know one another showing up. We were in different majors. Yet, it's almost immediate. And so that's about something, right? Even somehow, many people find themselves either randomly paired,
Mm-hmm.
the person that they find themselves in the dorm room with or living on their floor, or the people that the sort of their lowest common denominator that they're related to. Oh, the person that grew up in the similar circumstance, from South Philly, in that community with me, and so we share sort of a reference, a geographical reference. We end up being friends.
Right.
But then there's this thing that we've been doing. I used to have this quote that said, "I don't have any unextraordinary friends." I don't know where you guys get your whack friends, because all the people in my life are doing incredible things. That's been true for 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
right? And then before we started running institutions and leading companies, they were always on the cutting edge. And that is about an attraction. They found
Right.
each other.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going on that those people always find each other?
So one, there's comfort in proximity, right? And so I've learned from moving so much, even in my adult life, that you realize that the stickiness of some relationships is just situational. We're in the same situation. We have something in common, a common goal, a common struggle, a common circumstance, and that can bring people together. But when
Yep.
those people get separated geographically, and that the energy that ties them together gets weak, or the circumstances change, then you see a lot of those relationships fall off. And it's funny
Yep.
you mentioned, um, you think about what happens in your teenage years. You have an energy, right? And so all energy is attracted to energy, right? So like will find like, but that's happening with us at an early age, and some people well into adulthood before they've even been able to identify the frequency that they operate on. They don't even know what it is. But I think that like will find like, right? And then as we mature, then we can attach our values to it. So now it's not just this energy; it's do we share the same values at any level? And I think that allows people to sort of maintain that stickiness. So people who congregate for any number of reasons and do any number of things, you can look at it and say, what do these people have in common? They're going to have that that shared energy, and then at a certain level, they're then going to demonstrate those shared values with one another. And I think that that's where again the stickiness in the relationships come from.
Yeah. I mean, I totally resonate with the idea that if you're anywhere near people who share your values and can hear them talk, it's like a beacon of light. You're like, oh my goodness, they they're speaking my language.
Right.
But it's not like we have complete parallelism, right? I mean, one of the things I think about is so you chose, you told me this. I think I already knew it. You chose one college. You applied to one college
Yeah.
and did it kind of last minute. I applied to one college. I for the reason that it was the only one that offered me money. So we
Okay.
both sort of ended up in the same place um, through processes that weren't long term, super thought out, or aiming at ending up there. You though, you got there and pretty quickly, a la Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, decided this place is not really going to be the launching point for the thing that I really want to do. Sort of the exact opposite is I kind of got there and technically never left. I am literally still sitting inside a university. I just stuck around until they put me in charge. And so, what do you think was going on in your understanding of that moment in your life where you were like, "Oh, I need to find a path that is not the traditional one," and just how does a young person even understand like finding a new path that is not the one that everybody's around you has built for you?
Right. Well, one again, the power of environment. I didn't really come from an environment where education was valued. And so the promise of what a good education was supposed to do for you, I didn't really even understand what that was at the time. Although I
Mm,
was a learner, and so I felt in some areas I was learning faster than they could teach me, right?
yeah,
And so I
yeah,
kept finding myself on these separate paths, but then having these obligations to that sort of the rigor of curriculum, and it wasn't adding up to me. And then I had an internship or a co-op with the Navy, and then I got to kind of see it in the real world, and I was very quickly able to return to campus and be like, yeah, none of this is going to help me. I got to do
yeah.
something different.
You won't remember it, but we sat in your dorm and you were explaining what your co-op at the Navy was like, and of course your descriptions of the work that you were doing, the systems you were working on, I was just like, what is he talking about? Like, it was as if a Martian had landed and was trying to explain what life on this other planet was like, right? There was nothing in any of our past experience. Even, I mean, we understood what work was and what maybe it meant to be in a professional setting, but because we were young, had never been, we weren't, like we didn't go to work with our fathers who like ran companies or anything like even the framing was like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And so, did you find in that early experience, that early exposure, where there's things like responsibility and having to deliver on projects, like the kinds of things that you never have to do in high school or an early academic career in college, like did you find it really challenging to switch gears and to find out what success meant in that context?
I don't think so because I could kind of do the math and kind of see what the value of it was. But even in that environment, I could see what was nonsense. You know, you run into a couple things happen. One is you run into people who have been working on the exact same project in research and development for 10 years, 15
Yeah,
years,
right.
right? And they just keep showing up and doing the same thing. And so I wanted to learn, and so I found myself down in the actual library
Yeah.
that was what was at that facility. And I remember the person that I was responsible to. He's like, "Well, where you been?" I said, "I was down in the library. You know, like, I'm reading. Like I was working in signal analysis. You know, the radar. Like I worked on the simulation for the adaptive radar system that's in the Navy's P3s, right? So back in the day, it got honorable mention for programming at the IEEE conference or something like that. But I'm down there looking through all these materials, and the guy's like, "Dude, don't look at that stuff." So what are you talking about? He said, "Oh, that's just stuff that we write for the Pentagon so we can get more funding. Like, don't believe that stuff." I'm like, okay. So even this is even this is, I won't call it a sham, but it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
real. It's not something that I can attach to, right, foundationally and say, okay, this is a thing, and I can use this as a base or foundation to learn or express other things. So I've always been in search of what is real, what's
Mhm.
sustainable, and what can not only be applied to me, but what can be applied to other people. Hence, what I call a principle, right?
Right.
And so once something proves itself to have minimal value, it's not transferable. You know, it can't really be communicated. It like then I'm out. I'm just out. And so,
Yeah.
although I was rejecting the college experience at that time for those certain reasons, that other environment that kind of awakened me to that still didn't fare any better upon further inspection. So I'm just constantly on this search for what's real.
Right. So that idea that principles are about sort of ferreting out what at its core is quote unquote real. I mean, that's a great lead in to really digging into the principles of the live free lifestyle, which I think
Mm-hmm.
of as the most current evolution of a project that you've been working on for many, many years. One of my cold open questions was gonna be name all the projects, startups, or companies that you have created in the last 35 years and give you a minute to go. Go, just do it.
Good
But
luck. That's not gonna happen.
I was like, that's unfair. That's unfair. I should have given you a heads up and had you write them down. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I would like to get into like your origins and motivations for the book, as well as your hopes and aspirations for this project and where you think it's going and who you think that core audience is that can really benefit from it. So let's start with the origins and motivation. So, how long have you been working on it in this evolution,
Mm-hmm.
and why? And really, like in a world that is moving more to digital. I mean, we're literally doing a podcast, but also broadcasting and blah blah blah. Is a book is a physical thing that you can
Mm-hmm.
hold in your hand and or read, is that in some ways rooted and grounded in the past? Why this way? What were you thinking?
So one, there are still people who actually read, right? They'll pick up an actual book and read it. But then there are also people who will, listen to an audio book, read an ebook, right? It's got to be some way that you take in. If you take in information, there's only so many different ways you can do that, right?
Yeah.
And then the further manifestations of this, you know, like we're looking at, having a course designed from this, and then people can run off and do their thing. And so, but because it's for the people that it's for, the form almost kind of almost doesn't matter. It does and it doesn't, right? But
Mm.
people will have the options of how they consume this. But but this one started. I kind of feel like around the Christmas holidays, so we're in that kind of 7, 8 months to actually get it to this form.
Yeah.
But the first half of the writing, I think, was actually done in February, so it went
Mm.
pretty quickly.
Yep.
But because of the way that the process was built, it took us longer, right? So we had focus groups because the to put out a book like this is is a bit audacious. Let's start there. And because it's me, it's a bit provocative, right? And
Mm.
so it's like,
Wait,
well,
say more. Why are you provocative?
man, because I think things, and then I just say things, but I don't know if
Okay.
people understand at what level I think about things, right?
Right.
Of kind of how I peel the onion, how I kind of force myself into defining different dimensions or perspectives on a thing before I speak on it,
Right.
or kind of what's mentioned in the book, like this practice of intentionality. Like, dude, I am constantly dissecting, walking around the thing, and so if I say it, it's it's pretty well thought out. But I've been doing this
Yeah.
for so long that that process happens like it is so fast on certain topics. Sometimes it takes longer because I have to really work through something because there's some emotional dissonance that I'm having with the answer. Um,
Yeah.
but so I just say, me, man. I'm pretty blunt, if that's the
Yep.
word. And some people say I can be
Straight. I think the word is
intense.
straightforward.
Well,
Straightforward.
I
Unvarnished.
it's often been
Not
referred
pretentious.
to as mean, um, you know, and
Never
I
heard it.
can say that
Never
one
heard
thing that can sting a person, but it's not intentional. Like I didn't know that that was a trigger for you, or it's just it's the way that, but it's because I see things so naturally and so purely
it.
because
Right.
I've gotten to that conclusion, not understanding that other people may not have arrived there. Again, back to the book. That's why there is right is not always right now, right? My
Right.
timing's not your timing, but yeah, I'm that matter of fact sort of dude. But let me caution you with this though. The one thing I'm really careful of is to not express the things that I'm saying as the truth, right? Like
Mm.
there'll be other
Good
volumes,
point.
and one of those, the writing will be beware of the truth, right? Because
Mm.
one, I think the word is overused. Truth is empirical, right?
Mm.
And what people
Mm.
really mean is,
Yes.
I'm not, because people excuse themselves with some of their behaviors, especially in their language, the way they communicate with people. Say, well, I'm just telling you the truth. No, you're not. You're telling me
Right.
your truth. You're telling me your
Right.
perspective,
Correct.
which is still
Yeah.
this perfect equation of everything that you've ever experienced, brings you to this conclusion. Well, every other person on the planet you talk to has had different experiences and different perspectives. So they're not going to arrive at your quote unquote truth. But the other
Yeah.
reason why there's danger in using the word loosely is that if I tell you something is the truth, I can't say that without there being an expectation that you modify or comply with what I'm saying because a truth is empirical. So, by the mere fact of me stating it and calling it the truth, is now putting an obligation on you to change.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I'm,
I
I'm
mean,
not
so
with
this
that.
idea. Well, this idea that the truth can't be different in my life than it can be in your life, and by calling a thing the truth, it means that we both have experienced it the exact same way, and there are no other versions of reality
There you go.
that can also fit. I so I want to harken you back to something that you probably don't even remember. In the late '90s, maybe some of it, the late '90s, we were at the Black Expo
Oh
as
Jesus.
vendors. I was a I was just a tag along. But and thinking about it, I was like, oh man, this was my first sort of startup experience. And so there we were. We could talk all day about the experience of the Black Expo, which was super famous in the 80s and the 90s and hit all the major Black urban centers. It was kind of the place to be. But it was meant to sort of highlight Black business and create connections amongst those who were aspirational in the Black community. I won't talk about the number of T-shirts that were sold or or how
Jeez.
much shea butter you could buy. But you were there with a booth, sort of super uniquely selling software. Never forget this, because people would come up. Computers were new. Nobody had like an email address, and it was still like the world was still kind of trying to figure out, did people need like PCs in their home? That
Hmm.
idea was still hadn't yet caught on. Like if people had computers in their home, they were like gaming consoles. But this idea that people were going to be productive in some way. And so I remember you would bring up on the screen this square, and people were like, "What is that?" You're like, "You're gonna love this. It's called a window." And be like, "A window? Tell me more." And then you would do this. You would like, "Watch this. I'm gonna take this text and take it out of this window. I'm gonna pull up another window and put the text in there." And people were like, "Oh my god, that's magic. What kind of voodoo is this?" It was cut and paste, but
Hmm.
there wasn't even a language for cut and paste. And at that moment, you'd make a pitch like, "Do you want to know more? Might you want to invest?" And people would be like, "Absolutely not," and walk away. And that was like a metaphor, I feel like, for your whole life, right? You're like, "Let me come here, let me show you something."
Hmm.
And people are like, "That's incredible." And then you're like, "You want to try it?" And they're like, "Nah, it's not for me." and so, and so,
Yeah.
what do you have you gotten better, especially with regard to what you're putting out in the world now? How do you feel about the fact that for some people it all feels like a magic trick and not something that they could dig deep, learn more, apply to their lives, and really make personal changes?
Yeah. Oh, so a couple things on that. So one is I feel that people in my near circle, right, kind of look at my life like it's a magic trick.
Mm,
All right, and what I've accomplished, but it's not that. And it's interesting. You go back to things like the Black Expo, and that's one of those places where I say I was able to do the math on it very quickly. And I was one of those people that when I showed up at Lincoln University, and in that orientation week, decided I was going to go into computer science. I wasn't one of those kids who had ever touched computers. There wasn't one in the home. There wasn't one. If they were at my high
right.
school, I never touched them, right? But
Absolutely.
the split second I came in contact with the potential and the utility of the technology, again, this thing that I call doing the math, I was like, this
Right.
is going to be everywhere. And I remember, people have come back to me and said, remember when you said it was going to be, I don't really remember it, but I could do the math because I could see the utility. But because I have this focus on solving problems, meeting needs, right?
Yeah.
And answering questions. And so that's the piece that's always been in me. So when I see something that has true function and utility, I'm like, oh, let's go. And it's never ever been just for me. It's like, how can I show or teach this to other people? And
Right.
I don't know if I could tell you where it came from, but I can tell you that it's legit, right? And so,
Yeah.
my first semester at Lincoln, they start you with these programming classes. The classes that I took in my first semester freshman year, I was teaching those, mentoring people, tutoring the next semester. And so that
Yeah,
ability
yeah,
to be able to take it in, ingest it, and then be able to bring it out in some form that people can use. Man, I've been doing that for as long as I remember. As a musician, I would go somewhere and play somewhere, a gig or something, and someone walks up to me and say, "Hey, you did this thing, this chord," and I'm like, "Oh, let me show that to you." Where other
yeah,
people will be like, "Nah," you know,
yeah, yeah.
they're gonna hold it in. So it's just that mechanism. I mean, we can deep dive that more, but that mechanism has kind of always been there.
I mean, we won't even talk about the sort of that weird musician relationship. Like there are literally some keyboardists that play in such a way as to use their body to hide the chorus because they don't want people to lean over and steal them.
Right.
They, they love to hear people listen to their recordings and go, "What is he doing with his left hand? What is he doing?" But that's never been kind of your impetus. You're like, "Let me show you how to do it. Let me break it down for you."
Right. Which is kind of how this kind of came about, right? Like, you
Yeah,
know, it's kind of interesting. So with the book, my three children wrote the foreword for the book. You wrote the introduction, um, thankfully. Um, but they had issues with the fact that it's like, well, why are you starting here, right?
yeah,
Because in the book, it really starts with my cancer thing, event, issue. um, and in the book, if people didn't know me, they would really think that that was the beginning of the journey, and it really started before that. But that event played such a pivotal role, and even what this term "live free" is came from that, right? But if you go back to the very very beginning of sort of my personal growth, self help journey, I was so ignited by not just the zeal of what I had heard, but its
yeah,
application and the results that it was providing in my life. I was like, oh, I got to tell other people about this. I have to show this
yeah.
to other people. And so I've been sort of coaching and mentoring people in those sort of ideas for a really, really long time. But that's because there's a conviction in me that this works. And it's not about, I think I know something. I'm so smart. It's like, let me tell you something and you can go off and be great. Like, go do your thing. Make your thing easier, make it more successful. So the number of people that I've been able to help get out of debt, buy their first house, not get fired from a job, turn into six-figure plus earners, and scale their businesses and become have $1 million but it just kind of comes out of me so naturally, and so it's just a passion that I have.
I want to say though, I totally understand the position that Jerry, Brooklyn, and Nicalia were coming from. You could start this story almost anywhere, right? You could start it on the lonely basketball court in Kankakee. You could
Hmm.
start it in high school. You could start it, there in your dorm room at Lincoln. I was thinking this morning, like early this morning, that I think I remember the last time, maybe in your life, when you weren't the person who had all the resources. And now I'm going to tell a really quick story that is going to make you wince.
Okay.
Because we were in your car and we were headed into town, and, gasket blew. It was a water pump.
Oh yeah.
We had to, yeah, so there we are on the side of the road in Lincoln, PA, essentially Alabama in the middle of the North.
Hmm.
And anything could have happened. We could have ended up lynched, but somehow we got into town. I don't remember, did we walk or did someone like pick us up?
I don't know.
Um, but I do remember that even in getting into town and trying to get people to help us, it was like out of a scene from like In the Heat of the Night. Like, like what you boys want? And we were just like, we need some help with this car, blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah. And it was, oh, it needs a water pump. I think you already knew it needed a water pump. And you turned to me and was like, listen, we just need some money for this water pump. And where I had money, I have no idea, because I showed up at college dirt poor. I guess I had like a work study or something. But ponied up the dollar happily. I just want to say, happily ponied up the dollars. And I will say that was the
30,
best
thir-
investment I've
30
ever made.
$30 to be specific back then.
30 whole dollars, which in 1985 might be equivalent to $2,500 today. with, with inflation.
Dude, let me just tell you how much I don't dig being broke. But anyway, go ahead. Just
The
finish
last
that.
that is the very last time um you ever had to turn to me and ask me for any resources. And I literally feel like from that moment on, you've been out in front. All these people that you've helped, all these people that you've dug into. Like, I feel like, yeah, that was the best investment in $30. It's paid off like a million times over.
Hmm.
It's such a long journey from, hey, do you have $30 so we can put this water pump in this car, to where you are today. How do you understand what has been almost, I mean, nobody's story is linear, but how do you understand like never going back to that point?
So a couple things with that. So there is sort of this attribute that people assign to me by saying, "Oh, he's so focused and he's so driven." Um, in part, it's true, but the other part of it is I did not know what success was because
Hmm.
I hadn't seen very much of it. But I knew what failure was. I knew what lack was, right? I knew what it meant to be destitute. I knew what it was like to not have enough, when there wasn't enough food, when there was no lights, when there was, I know that stuff really, really well, right?
Wow.
Where
Wow.
if you had a car, right, to get in it and attempt to drive from point A to point B, that's an adventure. Because I don't know if the car's going to make it.
No,
First of
right.
all, is it going to start?
Right.
So I was so familiar with that. I was not familiar with success. And this is what people get wrong. Is they think that I'm driven to succeed. In my early years, I was driven to not fail. So I'm attempting to outrun failure. I ended up at success. And at that point couldn't even recognize it. I didn't know how, I didn't understand it. I couldn't value it. I just knew that it wasn't failure. It wasn't poverty. Because I'm like, I'm not going back. Right. So
Wow.
and
Wow.
so that was sort of the drive. And then, just the way that this learning showed up and this opportunity to expand my awareness. And again, now I saw that I had utility. I have value. Right. So if I can answer questions, solve problems, and meet needs, money's not going to be my issue.
Wow. To tell me, do you feel like you've transcended like the dollars in your pocket? You don't really think about, do I have enough money? Do I not have enough money? So many people are sort of driven by their finances, right? They only see their future as a function of their current finances.
Dude, it's weird, right? Because in some ways, I never think about it, and I tell people, money should never be the reason you don't do something, right? I talk to
Right.
a lot of people who want to start something, investors like, money should not. Money is everywhere. Just the money you need is in somebody else's hands, right? And if you understand the value exchange, right? Or you can demonstrate the credibility, i.e., the credit, right? To be credit worthy, trustworthy, you can get access to money. So there's this side of me that before I think about it, dude, I'm out doing stuff like like year, like I bought $1 million worth of property. I had no plan to do that. I didn't even know that I could do it till I did the first one. After I did the first one, it's like, oh, I get it. There's a
Yeah.
system, there's a way, there's a method, and then people kind of telling me do this, don't do that again, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that side where I believe that again, money is like air. Like I'm never walking around thinking about is there going to be enough air. And I tell people this all the time. You probably haven't spent very much time today thinking about water, right? Or
Yeah.
because you perceive that there's plenty of it, it's everywhere. But you've probably
Right.
spent some time thinking about the lack of money, how to
Hmm.
get it, where it is, why it's scarce, right?
Absolutely.
So
Ab-
that's about our mindset. So I have this other side where I will so quickly invest in myself in something that I see, want to try or do. Like I don't, and I'm so curious. These darn ads on social media, and I was like, dude, I buy so much stuff, but it's about my curiosity. Now, so that's one side. So I don't see any end to it. But then it's like, it's like my wife will buy like 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 the really good tissues you can have, like the disposable ones in the like the come in the little rectangular
yeah,
box. Dude, I
exactly.
handle those things like they're gold. Or if I'm going to use two paper towels as opposed to no, this is critical. In the midst of all that I've done and all that I've accomplished,
Right.
I can still have daily challenges with lack. Right?
Oh,
So
that's deep. That's
that's
deep.
my
Yeah.
thing to over. So on one hand, I'll write big checks, quick checks. On the other side, it's like I don't know if I want to put this second, teaspoon of sugar in here. Like it's the weirdest, dude. It is the weirdest
Right.
freaking thing. I
Right.
promise you. So, but that's my ongoing challenge, right?
Right.
Although I fundamentally believe that there's enough of everything. If we were to run out of anything, it would be at a
Yeah.
point where we no longer need that thing because it's been replaced by something else, right? Like
Yeah.
the universe is about abundance. This whole construct, this holodeck we live on, is all about abundance, all about the idea that there is enough. But dude,
Yeah.
even with and it's people don't want to believe this stuff. I'm telling you, dude. I'll be like, ooh, I better hold on. I better hold on to this. It's my constant battle.
So many of us are averse to failure, right? Because failure feels amazingly personal. And it also feels like we might not have the resources to dig ourselves out of a hole that we've gotten ourselves into. So why go forward?
Hmm.
Like, what is your appetite for failure and how do you manage it when you find yourself there?
So I have so many of them, um, and so it's not the failure; it's the upfront risk, right?
Mm, say more.
Um, well, I mean, early in my adult life, I became responsible for other people,
Right.
right? And so if I
Right.
had lived this point single, I would have taken more risks. Because of what I came from as a child, I never wanted the people that I'm responsible for to feel what I went through as a child. So that was a clear line, a threshold that I'm not going to pass. I'm not going to risk so much that it risks their sense of stability and how they live. So that was my line that I wouldn't I wouldn't cross
Yeah, that's like your core commitment.
because I didn't have that as a child. In the
Right.
absence of that, or in what I could only now describe as, maybe some irresponsible parenting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because if a child lives in an adult world, right?
Right.
And the experience that's provided to you is by virtue of the adults that are around you.
Right.
Mine was not stellar. I didn't like that, right? Like there's still a lot. Like I don't know that I should be thinking so much about things from my childhood at this age, but they are still there. They're still reminders, and so it has been sort of the governor on certain risks that I will take. But I have a better understanding of money. I have a better understanding of how to manage. So if you have a risk, put it this way. So if you have a risk, you can do one of three things. I can eliminate that risk, like it's gone, like I no longer have that risk. I can
Right.
mitigate that risk, meaning that sort of the blast radius of that risk can be contained, or
Right.
I can accept that risk,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I live in those three worlds, right? Understanding those things. So it's always upside potential and downside risk. Everything, well, most things have some component of that structure that people should consider because a lot of people are running away from an opportunity, a dream, a mission, a vision, an assignment because of the risk. It's not a reason
Right.
to not do it, right? If you get in a car and drive, you have profound risk getting in the car. You have it getting on in a plane. You have it walking into, any like things can happen to us so all the time. So we live in this construct where there's always risk, it's like, how do we factor it? And then where does fear, anxiety, imposter syndrome, all those other things come in? Because those are the boogeymen. That's the haunted house. It's not that I have
Absolutely.
risk. It's how is that risk now being amplified into my life through these other means?
Right. It's all the stuff that at 2 a.m. keeps you up, right? It's the fear of tomorrow. It's the I know what I should do, but not really sure I can pull it off.
Right.
So when you can't get sleep, when it's right there at the front of your head and you're flipping over, your partner's asleep because they don't even know how dangerous it is, how close to the edge you guys have come. How do you manage that moment?
Internally, like there have been points of peril. I promise you, my family never even knew that's where we were.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because I again this idea of not wanting to expose them to that, or and even if it's something that has great promise and potential, it's still scary for some people, right? And so
Mm.
the last the last real estate purchase was the condo in Puerto Rico. The one before that was the 7 unit apartment building in Illinois, right?
Mm.
And that for some people that's scary. One is the first property was the 3 unit, then the 7 units, like, and that seems like a big jump. Like some people will say, well,
Right.
you should do some duplexes, do some 4. The
Right.
opportunity was there. I could do the math. I'm like, we're in, and I could do it in
Mm.
such a way that I could manage my risk in it. But the simplicity of being able to pay the mortgage and the taxes and provide health insurance, I'm like, dude, just I rest with that. That's my responsibility. I may reach into other people for help, guidance, support,
Right.
but the people I'm responsible for, by and large, are shielded from that. They have they have no idea. Like right now, you know, and I don't want, this is not a real estate
I was
conversation,
like,
but I
don't expose them to anything that they don't already
right,
know,
but
because we're
but
having a conversation.
if you own real estate, a bunch of properties, or you have these other assets, like this is a digital asset. That's a whole different
Right.
conversation. The process, the time, they are aware of the time. They're not aware of the
Right.
process, and they're certainly not aware of the cost. Right? That's me, but that's still reminiscent from my childhood, and wanting to shield them from the boogeymen that were haunting me in my childhood.
Right. Well,
So
let's talk about this asset that you've built. So, if you had to elevator pitch, um, Live Free Lifestyle Volume One, give it to us. What would it be?
it would be, let me introduce you to 21 time tested principles that have helped me build a phenomenal life. And
And
hopefully
of
from
those
that, I
20,
can start a conversation.
and of those 21, let's assume I don't have time for all 21. So I was like, boil it down to the most effective one. What is it? Go for
Okay, so there's two answers. So let me give you the definitive answer. It's going to be the chapter that's entitled "Gratitude Breaks Through the Darkness."
it. Mm.
That would be the one. Everything else is situational. Where are you? So maybe the sage wisdom of Batman is the one for you. Maybe did you really just peel my carpet is the one for you. Maybe avoid the happiness trap is the one for you. But the foundationally, it is gratitude breaks through the darkness. After that, it would be the tradition of the talking stick, more than likely.
Hmm. Say more about the tradition of the talking stick and what it's about. What is that vignette about?
So I became familiar with the talking stick a few years ago on a vacation, and actually at a resort called Talking Stick. But then started to look at what is this, and so the Native Americans had the talking stick, and it was sort of something more than ceremonial.
Yeah.
But if the leader passed you the talking stick, right, in this circle, it gave you the right to speak. and everyone else the responsibility to listen, but to
To listen.
listen deeply. So this
Right.
idea of understanding that as human beings we are all connected, right? Whether people
Mm,
understand that, want to accept it or not, just go look up your quantum physics. It's all we are all connected. Um, and then we all have certain needs, right? The need to be seen, the need to be heard, the need to be understood, the need to be loved. And so without transparent, true engagement, we cannot provide that to one another, nor can we help to meet those needs for the person next to us. And we so selfishly, you know, admit meeting those needs for others, but then we desperately expect that from other people. And so this
yeah.
idea of
Yeah.
transparent engagement, which is I talk about the cone of silence, right, from Maxwell
Right.
Smart, right. Well, where are these places and these spaces where I can just be me, say me, do me, without judgment,
Yeah.
right, without anyone using it against me? Like those places are tough to find, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
the talking stick is just it's encouraging us to lean into transparency, lean into trust, be what we expect from others, and understand that we are all operating out of these certain needs to be seen, heard, understood, and to be loved.
So the whole concept I just really love. I was just 2 weeks ago giving a talk for the Washington Mandela Fellows. These are sort of the brightest young leaders from all over sub-Saharan Africa in different countries that come here for the summer to kind of take a deep dive to get sort of like a quick MBA, but also to build collaborations across the countries and the like. And I was giving a talk on servant leadership. And even though as a concept is deeply rooted in sort of a westernized Judeo-Christian tradition, it really is promoting the things that you're talking about. Like, how do we, no matter where we are in an organization, listen to each other with real humanity, become fully transparent, not just because I'm your boss or you work for me, but that we all have an opportunity to be ourselves and show up, and that ultimately that allows us to reach whatever our collective goals are. But
Right.
let's just face it, it's difficult. In our families, we have a role, and people usually lock us into that role. Either we're the person that everybody is expecting to have all the answers, or we're the person who's not allowed to give up any any suggestions. Same thing at work. And so, how do we move from a world that is organized around positionality, assumption, and literally like atomizing all our lives to a place where we're all allowed a space to show up, offer up what we have, and feel like it's being heard, and more importantly, like being accepted, like it is part of the solution.
For sure. I think the how starts in small increments, right? Because again, because of this powerful influence of perspective, the group that I come from, the city that I came from, the country that I come from, these ideologies that we have are constructs that separate us from
Yeah.
one another.
Yep.
But whether I'm talking to someone who's a different race from a different country, someone who's in a different position of authority and influence, at the end of the day, there's still a person behind the stripes,
Yeah.
right? That still has
Yeah.
these same human needs. All of us are there. And so, because I believe that this is the way that it's supposed to be, I believe that there will always be an opportunity for us to provide that perspective, provide that grace, provide that empathy. Like humanity has to show up because we're not robots, we're not automatons, right? Humanity
Wow.
shows up. Do we have the courage to lean into our humanity, right? And here's the challenge. This is another thing that I want to write about is these expectations that we place on one another. There's something
Yep.
wrong. There's something wrong with that, right? And so it's like if I have to read a manual to know how to greet you, there's a problem, right? I shouldn't have to take a class to get along with this one person. It's nonsense. It's absolute total nonsense. But
Hmm.
we've put up all these layers and all these barriers, and then there's all these rules. Dude, everybody take a step back, right? And there's still this idea of, well, what do you want from other people, and are you prepared to provide that for other people? Because we're not the center, right? We are part of a
Yeah.
community. And so this idea of community, understanding that we're going to be our best when we're all together, when we're working together. The solo act thing is it's a pipe dream. It's not even true. People think I did it by
You.
myself. Really?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, we've been using words like we're all together and concepts like we're all together and using words like community. And, I can't help not think like ironically, so you're an African American male, I'm an African American male. But that might not necessarily be the quote unquote community that you're describing. I think you've got a more expansive idea about who these principles apply to,
Right.
which is interesting at the most divisive moment that we've seen since the Civil War. So let me
Right.
ask you the hard question. How do we think about utilizing these principles, which seem universal, in a world that only sees itself in small, limited, and individual tribes?
Um, and then maybe it starts with the maybe it starts with the tribes. But there has to be someone who's brokering the peace, someone who's extending the olive branch, someone who's handing you the talking stick. Like those people exist, and those people are purposed in those moments to do and be that. Like there's a function to this whole thing
Yeah.
that we're missing, and some people are trapped in very self-serving ideas that are damaging to others, right? Someone that we have in common, right? The late great elder, P. West
Yep.
said that your freedom stops when it infringes on my freedom,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so at some point, dude, we got to just give a damn about the person next to us. We got to care about the person. If you are void of that, you may become a danger to community. You could become a danger to
Mm.
society where your needs, your thoughts, your wants, your actions are prioritized above everybody else's. By what virtue does that happen? Right?
Hmm.
And there are some people who have those thoughts, but it's all. Think about it this way: like our challenge is, as African Americans, people of color, is equity, fairness, equality, our fight against racism, classism, right?
Yep.
There are some people who are very committed to the things that are a nightmare for you.
Right.
But
Right.
your first thought is, I can separate myself from them, I can fight them, I can eliminate them. Here's the thing, dude. No, you can't. And I'm saying that it's going to get a little deep here. It's because people don't
Yeah.
understand infrastructure, right? You stand on something. You think you're this independent solo act, out on the island doing you. No, you're not. I'm going to try to be kind with my words, but I'm going to say emphatically, no, you're not. But I'm also going to tell you, you don't understand infrastructure because you likely didn't build the house that you live in. You didn't make the car that you drive, or the public transportation that you use, or the plane that you get on, the buildings that you walk in, the food that you eat, you didn't grow it. Guess what, black person? I guarantee you, in all the infrastructure that serves your life, there's a racist there that doesn't have your best interest at heart. You can't eliminate them. There's people who don't like me because of the
You're everywhere.
color of my skin. I'm providing a service you don't even know about. And
Right.
so we're
Right.
still all connected and serving each other, even when we think we hate each other. We just don't have
Right.
awareness of this. I'm only going to be around my people. Dude, half the people that say they don't like me because of my color love my music. They still trying to be me, trying to dance like me. I'm not even going to go. Do you understand what I'm saying, though?
I
When
do.
we
I
when we
do.
fall into these boxes, it's because we don't understand infrastructure. You stand on something that was
Mm.
built, made, supported, repaired by somebody else. Appreciate that. You're part of the community whether you want to be or not. Just come give me a hug. Come give me a hug.
You get no hugs. You get no hugs today. So listen. So the principle that I immediately took from the book, wrote it down, made it like one of my daily sort of focuses that I meditate on at my desk is solve the solvable problems.
Oh wow. Hmm.
So my question for you is, what do you do with the unsolvable problems?
What problem is unsolvable?
Oh, please. I mean, I think we're kind of talking about some of them. Like, I can't solve the problem of an America that is inherently racist, or an America that doesn't even want to say, like, we might have a racism issue.
So the first is think about how you just locked me in with that, right?
I
So,
did.
and we'll get back to the true essence of solve the solvable problems is manage what's in front of you while you can before the unexpected comes and now you're overwhelmed. So that's the core
No,
of that.
no doubt.
But when we
No
talk
doubt.
about but that particular problem of say the issues in America, guess what? It's a whole big planet out there. Move.
Yeah.
Not like seriously, like move. And then people's like, well, this is where I was raised, or my mother's here, or my sister's here. So those are now constraints that you put on yourself. The problem of what you experience in America is solvable. You can leave. And oftentimes we're invited to, right? You can. But I'm saying, but it's just like the people who complain about their job, right? They complain about this job. And one of the things that I start saying to people is like, keep in mind two things with your job. One is you choose to come here, right? The work police don't come to your house at gunpoint, like, get up, go. It's not happening like that. And the other thing is, if your commute, let's say you have a 30-minute commute from your home to your job.
Hmm.
I'm like, how many other companies do you think you drove past coming to this place like it's the center of the universe? And it's not. Go work somewhere else. Solvable. But we put these constraints like it's got, and then we try to force fit or try to get environments or cultures to change to something that they already said what they are. They've demonstrated what they are. We do this in relationships. People have showed you who they are, but you so desperately want them to be something else. You've put that constraint on yourself. So then your unsolvable problem truly becomes unsolvable. But it's just the risk that
One,
you've accepted. You accepted it.
one of the reasons this principle is so sort of like at front of mind for me is you open the chapter with an example I think that we've all seen, which is a light comes on the dash
Oh, the check engine light.
of your
Mm-hmm.
car.
Right.
And I mean, forget the fact that cars have gotten really, really sophisticated, and so half those lights we don't really know what they mean. We have to dig in our glove compartment box, get out the book, find page 68, even to understand what the light is. But we do know that it's flashing and it's red, which means something's wrong. And you just kind of talk about the fact that the world is made up of different people, right? There are people who pull over immediately and go get them because they want to know what the hell's going on. And then there are other people who are like, the car's still running, so I'm just going to ignore that light.
Right. Yeah.
Or even when it's like, check the engine. For all kinds of reasons, people just ignore that. Like, I don't have money to fix the engine. Engine start at $500 to fix and go up from
Right.
there. Maybe if I keep driving, it'll go off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there are all kinds of ways to see a flashing light in your life. And I think what you're trying to say in this principle is don't ignore the lights. You see the lights?
Right. They're telling you something. They're a signal to something. Could be a big deal, could be a little deal, but the you're ignoring it is certainly going to make it a bigger deal. It's going
Yeah,
to make
so
it a more
it's the consequence of
impacting,
it.
a more costly deal by ignoring. And think about, like I can think of times in my life where I didn't want to know what was in the mailbox. I didn't want
Right.
to open that thing. Like right now is when like all my tax bills are showing up.
Yep.
Those envelopes usually do not get opened the day they show up, right? Because
So
I'm
this is
just
interesting. Even you don't open up that. You don't even when you know it's an IRS joint, you don't open it up that day, right? They pile up a little bit.
dude. But I can tell you, and I went through this last year. Um, I ignored one,
Yep.
and the consequence was not. It was not cool. It is the other thing. Let me just say this to people. Two things. One is a lot of the things that I say are not the byproduct of my genius. They are the
Right.
byproduct of mistakes that I have made.
Totally understand.
Right? And so I'm being transparent, right? And so it's the things that I've done and experienced or things that I have observed and then given deep consideration to. The second thing I have to say is, so we've been doing this. We're over an hour, and we'll keep going. People will watch or not watch, come back, watch later.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. We'll wrap.
that's up to them. But if this level of conversation is in any way off-putting to you, you probably won't like the book. It
Right.
is. You probably won't,
Right.
because
Right.
everyone that like especially the people from the focus groups that have experienced the material before it was published, it says I could hear your voice as I was reading, and it
Mm,
kind of felt like we were having a conversation,
conversation. Yeah.
right? And so the book is, if you believe that anything that I think or could contribute to your situation, your life, is of value, like you're going to hear my voice. And this is it, right? This open, very transparent conversation we're having. This is it. So some people have an appetite for that. Other people do not have an appetite for that. Then you could eat somewhere else. It's fine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, you make a point. We've been talking for an hour. I warned you yesterday. Like I could do this with you all day, right? So, and and at times have, find myself in the car. We go
Well,
down. We go around a rabbit hole, and then 2 hours later, I'm like at my destination and have been sitting in a parking lot for 30 minutes.
yeah.
So I just really want to focus on this one thing, sort of as an outro. It's also an extraction from the book, and I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
jumping off point for a bigger conversation. So there's a quote in the book that says that the treasure that you seek may be closer than you think, which for me immediately reminds me of Les Brown's "What You Seek Is Also Seeking You."
Mm-hmm.
So on the positive, on the we all find ourselves both blessed and challenged every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like what are the things that we should be thinking about to keep our minds and our attitudes and our perspectives on just how close the treasure that we seek are?
Okay. So a few things I would want people to keep in mind to help solve some of that riddle is first an understanding of why am I here?
Yeah.
Like, in what is my purpose? I think that part is important. Now, it's an entire conversation because there's a lot of ideas about where purpose comes from, right? Is this thing that
Yeah.
is self-determined, or is it something that falls out of the sky, right? And I'm less inclined these days for the purpose that falls out of the sky because those are like prison sentences, right? And it's like people feel like they're forced. Like I had to do this, I got to do this, or like this angry God is going to come slap them around. They're like that's always backwards, right? And immediately starts to rob your life of peace and joy. So like there's a way to walk into that conversation better. So, anyways, the first is purpose.
Yeah.
Then understand that that purpose is likely not about you, right? Even if there's advantage for you, there could be advantage for you in accomplishing that. It's always for other people. It's for the betterment of those around you, those in your community, those in society at large, those who are part of humanity, right? Because we are still answering questions, solving problems, and meeting needs. That's it. And so the thing that we seek, that betterment, it's just not about us. So then we get to this other part of it is like, well, how seriously am I taking this? And and this is what gets to me, right? And so I used to say this, and I think back in the Leap Forward, back in 1994, I said this. And so for people who share a sort of a God construct in their thinking, and people say we have all these problems in the world. Like if there's a God, why would God allow all these problems in the world? And even back then, my thought was, well, every person that's born is an answer
Hmm.
to a problem.
Hmm.
And if people would just play their role and do their part, all these problems that people want to contribute to God or a higher power, it's like that indictment is not valid. And I would look at them and say, what problem are you solving? And so the delay in taking that commission to say there's a problem that I can contribute to. That's really what this book is really about. I just want to help people solve problems,
Yeah.
meet needs, be on your way, go do something awesome and amazing. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
But
I do.
well, if there's before you get to and the other reason is, I'm just going to say this out loud. I'm inclined to believe that by virtue of the work that I'm doing, right, and solidifying it in constructs like this book and the ones that will follow, the classes, the cohorts, unfortunately, I will become less accessible to people who could probably easily reach me now. And right
Right.
now, 97% of the time that my phone rings,
Right.
someone's asking me for something
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
help them solve a problem,
Right.
create a strategy, scale their business. I know I won't be as accessible. You read my work, right? And now if people come to me to ask me, it's like I think Don Cheadle on his Twitter or X, whatever they call it now. I think his says like, don't ask me Google questions, right? People ask
Yeah. Yeah.
me
Yeah.
like I am such a deep thinker. Why are you asking me Google questions,
Right.
right? And so now it's like, okay, if you look at any of my social media, you read anything that I've written, you see my videos, all this, like, I promise you, like, go through all those previous Pivot Play podcast episodes. There's so much good stuff there. You don't have to ask me that. It's already there. This is coming.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
It
And
reminds me.
hey, and it's not just a book. There's a whole workbook. Like you can
There's a
you can
workbook.
you can get into it. And so it's unfortunate that I will become less accessible, but I feel that I've left so many breadcrumbs for people, right? And it really is about the people that I know that I am designed to support, serve, encourage, guide. It's not everybody, but those people, we gonna rock just fine. Other people might have an issue with it.
I'm going to take us back as an outro. 38 years ago, again, to two young guys standing on the side of a road next to a car that wouldn't move.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get out of my head. Is it inevitable that we would end up here talking about these principles with a lifelong commitment to help other people unlock their potential? Leading organizations, we'll do a little bragging, um, leading organizations where people every day either expect us to solve problems big ones or need us to bring unique thinking. And in some ways, I like to feel like it was inevitable.
Hmm.
But if that first principle that we unpacked was really true, and that part of the equation of personal success is who you surround yourself with, I'm so glad I made the choices that I made. And I just want to thank you for it, for being part of it.
No, I appreciate that. You kind of got me in a mode right now. When we talk about success and whether or not it was inevitable, dude, we we damn sure dropped enough grenades on it to make it an unlikely outcome, right? We certainly did
We tried. We
enough.
tried. We tried to
We
jack it. We tried
we
to jack it.
but here's the key. I think is a key um, with understanding that whether you view success as an event
Mm,
or a wave, I view success as a wave, right? And so, I go into these periods where it's really intense, right? And it's a lot of isolation to it. Anybody wants to do stuff like this, just get prepared for the isolation. It's just part of what comes with it. And so it's from these moments of intense focus, right? Grinding it out, the learning, the building, the doing that doesn't create success that is an event. It creates success that is a wave, right? And a wave is energy. And if you do it properly, these waves of success can carry you 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. When they start to dissipate, you'll know when it's time to go and do and start to build the next one. Or you just
yeah.
lay flat on the beach like a beached whale. You could do that too. You have that option. The interesting thing about that, and this is what some people who live in certain constructs won't like. If you have built the wave, especially as it's really nearing its peak, your humanity cannot mess it up.
Wow.
The worst
Wow.
of your mistakes cannot stop it. And this is what people don't understand. They certainly don't like it because they will see your shortcomings and be like, God damn it, this dude's still succeeding.
Right.
He's still winning. He's still doing stuff because I'm riding a wave. You can't stop. And the thing is, the exposure of my humanity is what's disturbing to people. But I've always had it. I may say that thing that's out of turn. I may make that rash decision. In a moment, I may have a fuse that's too short, and my anger get the better of me. But people think that the demonstration of your humanity is supposed to disqualify you from the results of what you've built. It's
Mm,
total nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. But the process of learning how to build your success in waves makes it more sustainable, it makes it more reliable, it makes it more predictable. So, all right, I'm gonna we've done a lot. Okay, so I do want to flip to this, right? So,
do it.
yeah, and largely we were supposed to be talking about. I don't know how much we talked about the book. We talked a lot about me,
It
but
felt like we talked about it.
what we did, it's in there. It's in there. All right. So anyway, so the book is available, and I have to say the response in we launched on Tuesday. It's Saturday for us, right? The
It
response
is.
has been phenomenal. People have
Excellent.
already have received their books. I know some people are working through their process, but some have read it. Reviews are showing up, all this stuff. So this is phenomenal response. So I appreciate it. Um, if you've watched any portion of this and anything that I've ever said in this, any part of this conversation resonates with you, the book will bring you value. So give it a shot, if you will. Um, and then for those who are also inclined, I want to move in the right direction. We've been rocking the Live Free gear for a minute here. But there have been some updates. So like there's solve the solvable problems is now available on a T-shirt and a sweatshirt and a coffee mug and um, regimen beats random things like that. So go livefreeinspirations.com. Check that stuff out if you would. Every little bit of it helps us, so we appreciate that. So with that, uh, we can put a bow on this, man, because this has really been good. This is
It's been fantastic.
well, what's also interesting. You were actually on the inaugural episode of Pivot Play.
Oh, I know.
Myself, and Derek Reed.
Absolutely, it was great. That was a great conversation.
So I'm about the work. If people want to do
Yeah.
the work, explore the challenges, talk about the possible. Like I'm that guy. I'm not sensationalism. I'm not going to be out there. I always say this. The things that I do are help, not hype.
Yeah.
And at this stage, it's so crazy that the first in-person seminar, like go get the hotel room, people pay a registration, that 30-page, it's around here somewhere in my
A
office.
workbook.
The 30-page workbook that I wrote for that, which is insane, in 1994, because imposter syndrome wanted to convince me I did not have the receipts
Right.
to use our vernacular.
Right.
I had not accomplished enough,
You're not old enough. You don't know enough. How? Right.
hadn't
Absolutely.
made enough, but the wave was building, but that conviction to want to share, help, teach, show, encourage, guide has always been there. And so that's a pretty audacious thing. Back in that day, like I'm going to rent this hotel room, I'm going to write this guy, and we filled that room with people. Had an amazing day.
We did.
And so this is not that. In light of that, this is not that strange. There's so much light on this. How can I hold this? It's not so much. Anyway,
There you
you've
go.
seen it. So this is not that strange. This has been part of my journey. This is who I am. This is the role that I'm supposed to fill. This is my pulpit. This.
I think we found your
not the
ministry.
other
I
one.
think we found your ministry.
But it's always been this,
Yeah.
right? To teach, to show, and it comes to me fairly easily, I would say.
Elder West. I mean, we've stopped doing the thing. Elder West also shared this one nugget that I haven't ever forgotten, and that was, don't be so anxious about your opportunity at the microphone. Life is going to present you enough opportunities that you'll be able to say everything that you want to say twice and be looking for new things to say. So let somebody else have a platform sometime. You are not at a lack for opportunity.
Right.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Well, that's why right is not always right now. But
Right is
but
not always
I,
right now.
dude, one day I'd like to do something, just expose people to the root story, like the real core, right? Where this really took hold with me. I would love the opportunity just to share it.
Yeah.
And what was that? What was the epiphany that is the true pivot that changed everything for me?
Yeah.
And what that has become, but then what it meant to work that out, and what it meant to walk that out, right? Like you
Wow.
mentioned those
Yeah.
times, like back in the day, like even as a Bible teacher, like I did that for 7 years, right?
Wow.
And
Right.
started with a small group that became a massive group because of, in that circle became a big group because of the engagement,
Yeah.
but all the individual conversations and the small workshops and the cohorts, like I've been sharpening these knives for a minute.
Yeah.
And so now you get to this stage in life, how are you not thinking about legacy? How are you not thinking about, well, okay, I don't want to die with all of this inside of me, right? And now there's there have been people who have benefited from it. Certainly my family. And this is the tough thing. Like, I would love to talk, but I think it's so grating for people sometimes to hear people talk about their successes
their own
in that
experiences.
way.
Right.
So I don't do it very often, but I think that there is value in it when I look at what I've been able to accomplish from literally nowhere, right? And again, that intensity of effort and grind it out, so the person who was a college grad, dropout, who then went back and did, accomplished 2 degrees in 2 years, right? Like,
Yep.
I know how to, but to see, the accomplishments of Dion, my wife, the accomplishments of my children and what they're doing,
those characters,
it's at least something worth listening. Filter through it, take what you want, but you know what I mean. But this is,
I know exactly what you mean.
It has turned into something.
I can't even get on Jerry the Third's podcast. Like, I'm not even good enough for him.
So it is
be
that.
honest.
So we can put a wrap on this. I appreciate you doing this because you're one of the few people who, even from, we'll call it the moment of epiphany, we knew each other before then, and so you've been able to kind of see my journey. Yep. And with his successes, with his failures, to know that there's some authenticity to it, like it's legit, and that's meaningful to me because there aren't a lot of people that rock with you for 30 plus years, or that you get to see grow, right? Like what you've accomplished in your career, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, right, is pretty phenomenal. But you always had the gray matter, right? You always had that prowess, but and I'm sure your journey too is like, how do you now match that up?
Yep.
With how you present yourself, how you come forward, and really creating that value proposition that allows you to contribute and then to be able to live well. Like, that's not an unreasonable thing, right? Do what you do, add value, live well. So anyway, I'm looking, and this is the way my mind works. So we've been on here for an hour and almost 28 minutes. Like 1:30 seems like the magic moment now because we're here, just the way my mind works. And 5s are a big number for me. Won't get into that.
Excellent.
So and people will drop off. But anyway, if you're just getting to this, we're at the end. Give it a few minutes, and this thing is going to cycle. Go watch it from the beginning.
We're super happy.
Right. Please go to Amazon. Principles of the Livefree Lifestyle. It's worth it. It'll be worth it. So, dude, I appreciate it. And this went off technically without a hitch. I'm also pleased for that because these things sometimes can go sideways. So what's the last thing? I've been getting a lot of comments about your introduction and about my kids writing the foreword, which I got to be honest, when I first read it, I was emotional. And then in narrating, because we're finishing up the audiobook, in narrating it when I had to read their words out loud.
Yeah.
So I'm not without emotion. I think some people think that's a thing, but I probably cry more now than I ever did. But that's the gratitude will bring that out of you, right? Go check out that gratitude chapter. If you haven't hit your stride yet, I don't know how to bring the pieces together. Start to build a practice in gratitude, and your life will change dramatically. It has to. It's just the way that it works. You think that if you were raised again on thankfulness, what is it? It says it in the book. Thankfulness is transactional, but gratitude is transformational. That's right. It really will change your entire life. All right, dude. We out of here. All right?
We're gone.
Peace.
Peace.